All right. Hi, everyone. We are waiting for one more panelist to pop into this room, but I am excited to welcome you to the final panel of Introduced Virtual. We're going to be talking about how to tell your hometown innovation story now, and I am Julie Zeglen, the managing editor at Technically. Very excited about this panel that we have coming up. Let's make sure everyone's here. I think we do have everyone. Awesome. All right, great. So let me get started by first shouting out that we have a live illustrator joining us right now. That's Terry, there he is, Terry Laban of Breakthrough Visuals. He's gonna be working on an illustrated recap of everything we're gonna be talking about. We're very excited to see that result. But telling your hometown's innovation story. Yes, so, also wanted to mention that we're gonna have a Zoom Q&A. This is the Zoom Q&A, but we have a chat section that you're welcome to throw some questions in. Afterwards, we will have a short break, but then everyone's invited to join for the final keynote of the day. That's gonna be in a separate Zoom session. This session is being recorded. We're gonna be popping a recap of it up on the Technically site in the next couple of days. And this is our first virtual conference, so you should please take our post-event survey to help us figure it out for the next time to make it even better. All right, everyone. Thank you again for joining. So again, we are talking about telling your hometown's innovation story now. So that means, when an economic shock takes place, cities and regions have an opportunity to reset certain narratives. And with a recession looming brought on by a pandemic, how can cities talk about what is working in their economies? How can cities outside of Silicon Valley especially thrive in the wake of COVID? So our panelists right now, joining us from Milwaukee, we have Archna Sahay, the president of Sahay Consulting. Joining us from Tampa, we have Lakshmi Shenoy, the CEO at Embark Collective. Joining us from Birmingham is Deon Gordon, president at TechBirmingham. And joining us from the Pittsburgh region, we have Sean Luther, the executive director at InnovatePGH. Thank you all so much for joining. We are very excited to have you. So a poll is going to be popping up in a minute that everyone who is watching can participate in. There it is. How will COVID-19 impact the perception of growing companies in places outside Silicon Valley? So you can all take a second to fill that out, but we'll check out the responses to that in another minute or so. But panelists, welcome again. I would love for each of you to just go through, talk about first what your organization does, as well as tell us something that you love about the city that you live in now. So Deon, I see you on my screen. Do you want to go first?
I love how you just decided to call me out. That was quite awesome, but I'm up to the challenge, sure. So I'm Deon Gordon. I'm the president, CEO of TechBirmingham. Also happen to serve as the executive director of Tech Alabama, our signature project being the education farm. We recently announced that in February, just as all of this was really starting to kind of reach our shores, I guess, in partnership with Apple. And so the idea behind that work is really just to create an ecosystem where K through 12 all the way to career have access to the tools, the resources, the training, the strategies needed to help individuals not just fill the jobs of the future, but create the jobs of the future. And on the TechBirmingham side, we're a traditional technology association, right? So just making sure we are amplifying the voice of the region. A lot of people are surprised when I tell them about Birmingham because they just hear Alabama. And so they kind of assume, tumbleweeds going across low plains, but Birmingham's a metro area, 1.2 million individuals. So we serve about 300 companies, an emerging tech hub. So, right, kind of going back to the role that we play, just making sure that we lift that up, that we're promoting the ecosystem, letting folks know about Birmingham, and that we're doing what we can to strengthen just what that community looks like. So what I love about Birmingham, we don't have enough time to really get into it. I'm a native, born and bred, left for a few years to attend Auburn University, the obligatory War Eagle. If you're not into college football, that will go right over your head. But I love the city because it is it's surprising. It's beautiful. It's gorgeous. The food is amazing, right? Recent James Beard winners. We have a role that is central to like the collective conscience of America, right? Going all the way back to the civil rights and the human rights movement. And we're getting a chance to kind of tell that in new and exciting ways. The history of it, right? Its founding is very unconventional, post-antebellum. It just has a lot of character and a lot of bones, and we're really starting to kind of come into our own as a region and tell our story to a broader audience. And we're seeing past years of effort really start to manifest and materialize. Downtown, you cannot go anywhere without seeing a construction crane. New businesses are opening up, and of course now we have COVID, right? But the resiliency that those businesses are responding with, it's just super encouraging. So I won't monopolize it, but we'll have another session where I just tell you all the great things about Birmingham.
Awesome, thank you, Deon. How about you, Sean?
Hi, everyone. Sean Luther. I'm the Executive Director of InnovatePGH. I'm distracted at Deon's War Eagle because I went to Clemson. And so we're also going to have a whole happy hour chat on college football and our Tiger rivalries after this. InnovatePGH is about 2.5 years old. We were established in 2017 to implement recommendations from a Brookings Institution report. And our work is in two big buckets. So one, we're establishing and promoting and advancing an innovation district based in our Oakland neighborhood, which is where the University of Pittsburgh and Carnegie Mellon University both physically overlap. And then they're joined by UPMC. So together they represent the largest academic medical center in the country. But we're also accelerating entrepreneurship and the innovation economy in Pittsburgh in general, with the kind of idea that Pittsburgh's economic development strategy is fairly traditional, has been focused on business development in traditional sectors. And then our university space has kind of functioned separate from that. And so Innovate's charge is to mash those together and really recognize that the presence of two globally significant research institutions in such a dense area represents our marquee economic opportunity for the 21st century. So we're not an accelerator, we're not a member association. We actually work as a public-private partnership and a bridge to aggregate all of the players in the tech-based economic development sector in Pittsburgh. What I love about Pittsburgh right now is that there is no place better to be in spring than in Pittsburgh. Part of that is because sometimes you don't love Pittsburgh in February, but you can't beat it in the spring. We are fortunate, and I think a lot of people recognize our strengths in the foundation community and all those really rich old white dudes who nearly wrecked our environment about 100 years ago. The upside of that is they left us with a really remarkable urban park system. And Pittsburgh has this cool, dense urban core, but you're in the Allegheny forests or you're in rural West Virginia in like 45 minutes to an hour outside of the city. So the opportunity, especially with quarantine and social distancing, to get out into nature and have a little bit of space to breathe and really enjoy our favorite season in Pittsburgh has me pretty jazzed right now. So excited to hear from everyone else.
Thank you, Sean. How about you, Lakshmi?
Hi, everyone. I'm Lakshmi Shenoy. I'm coming to you from Tampa, Florida. So right off the bat, I'm pretty sure I have the best location for quarantine. I was tempted to take this in my backyard, but I thought it would be too cruel. But I moved down here. I'm new to Tampa. I moved down here 2 years ago to launch an organization called Embark Collective, which is a startup hub for early stage technology startups. The Tampa Bay area is one of the fastest growing regions of the country, but it still has a pretty nascent startup community. So the opportunity to really help form that community was really exciting. And I'm just thrilled that Embark Collective is playing a role in all of that. We have a physical 32,000 square foot hub, which is not super useful at the moment, but we complement that physical space with dedicated coaching from our staff. So our staff is made up of former startup operators. And so we work on a very intensive one-on-one capacity with each of the companies that we support. And we're supporting about 50 of them so far. So it's a really exciting role to be in. I get to work with amazing companies on a daily basis that are all navigating the COVID crisis in different ways. And Tampa Bay is a really great place to be. We have one of the largest real estate development projects going on down here called Water Street Tampa, which will double the size of downtown. So it's pretty amazing. Even with the COVID crisis, construction does continue. And to see the cranes, the number of cranes that are going up, we have a Super Bowl deadline for 2021 that we're trying to get to. And so it's still, in spite of the quarantine for the majority of people, there's still progress that's being made in our community, which is a light to see when we're all sort of hunkering down. And I was thinking as we were going through these introductions, just how much I really love all of the cities that everyone else is coming from. So I'm just excited to be a part of this conversation.
Yeah, thank you so much. And Archna, a daughter of Philadelphia, I suppose, but currently in Milwaukee.
Yeah, absolutely. So happy to be here. Love the Technically team, and exactly what Lakshmi says. Really exciting to see what everyone's doing in all the other cities. So thank you so much for this opportunity. My name is Archna Sahay. I'm president of Sahay Consulting. As a practice, we provide strategic guidance to corporations, municipalities, other organizations that are interested in advancing tech and innovation ecosystems in their local communities. So we've been in Milwaukee. I've been in Milwaukee for about a year and some months. October 2018, landed here as a project called Milwaukee Tech Hub, and the largest sponsor, Northwestern Mutual, and a variety of other Fortune 500s locally that came together to really think through how they advance the tech ecosystem here on the ground. And so for the past year, have been doing the boots on the ground research for them, tapping into the various communities, figuring out how we get that network effect, that ecosystem effect happening in Milwaukee in a bigger way, in a more impactful way. And the coalition officially launched October of 2019. The CEO was appointed in January of 2020. Of course, the strategies were laid down pre-COVID. So we're taking another look at that and kind of thinking through what the next few years look like. But really excited to see just the participation across all the levels, from corporate all the way down to the community, to really move this aspect of the regional economy forward. And what I love about Milwaukee, I had never been to Milwaukee before prior to this project. So I had no idea what I was walking into. Came in October. It's cold. It's really cold in Milwaukee. I will admit that. But I have to say, the lake is beautiful. So Lake Michigan, saw it from Chicago a number of times, but it is a completely different experience being right next to it in Milwaukee. So the public space, the appointment of public space in Milwaukee, the commitment to preserving that and having it be accessible to the community at large is just incredible. And to see the interaction between the citizens of the city and this public space, like throughout the year also, not just during, the 6 months of wonderful weather that they have, but like people are running outside in like negative 50-degree weather. Like, that's amazing. That's great. So love the public space in Milwaukee. Highly recommend.
Thank you, Archna. So we're checking out the poll results right now. How will COVID-19 impact the perception of growing companies in places outside Silicon Valley? We're going remote. It'll help. That's the winner. Some people, of course, said that small businesses are going to be wrecked. It'll hurt. And then somebody left a note in the comments saying some will thrive, others will struggle or go dormant. So that is a very middle of the road response there. Thank you. So also shouting out that we have an active chat going on. So and a Q&A section. So if anybody has questions throughout, you can throw them up there. I'm already seeing some conversation connecting Deon in Birmingham to Bethlehem and PA. So that's a cool outcome, hopefully. So let's now talk about how your city tells its story. So of course, that is the topic of our conversation overall. I want to call on all of you first, because I know that you all have really interesting things to say about this, but I'll start with Sean, because I know that Pittsburgh has historically been known as a steel town and now is becoming a tech hub. So can you talk about that shifting narrative?
Yeah, so I think the narrative itself is interesting, as we kind of struggle internally with what is our historical perception of ourselves, and then what is our future aspiration of what we can accomplish with our new economic assets. And, you know, given the unique time period that we're in, all stories have stopped. So no one's talking about anything other than the COVID crisis. I was on a neighborhood board or neighborhood development board meeting today. We spent an hour talking about each individual organization's response to COVID. Nothing to do with, you know, anything that we wanted to accomplish. And I think that that gives some space to adjust our regional and urban narratives based on our individual city's response to the crisis. And so, you know, for the first 3 to 4 weeks of this, everyone was talking about a vaccine. You know, all of our cities and all of our states have major life science research assets, and everyone was talking about whether Pitt or Temple or Penn or whomever is going to be the one to come out with the vaccine. But as we've gotten further into this, our story has shifted into what is the thing that Pittsburgh can do that no one else can do in this fight. And for us, that really is the intersection of artificial intelligence and life sciences, and the intersection of AI and public health and epidemiology. And so rather than just shouting into the wind, we're really trying to narrow in our conversation around what makes Pittsburgh different and how we kind of work as part of this global system. And that's gotten pretty basic into trying to get some earned media. We're paying really talented PR consultants to go out and remind the New York Times and Fortune Magazine and Politico that not everything that's happening in the COVID fight is happening in Boston and in San Francisco. Like, a lot of this is coming out of places like Baltimore and Cleveland. And I think that Pittsburgh has a really important role to play in that. And we're willing to kind of go to bat and kind of push that message out really aggressively.
Awesome, thank you. I know anybody else could have something awesome to add after that, so I'll open the floor to whoever wants to go next.
I'll jump in. So I'm new to Tampa, so I had to observe what was that identity, and it was interesting when I got down here. It wasn't handed out of like, this is our consistent narrative as a region, and there's a lot of assets here that were really interesting, but not necessarily the most competitive on a national, let alone international scale. Tons of healthcare, but obviously there's lots of other regions that can compete there. A lot on cyber and cybersecurity, especially because US SOCOM and is based in Tampa, but still there's other regions that can very much compete there. So it was a really difficult exercise to navigate what is our narrative. And we were lucky to be a part of the Rise of the Rest tour in 2019. And so we were sort of forced to have this moment to decide what would be our narrative. And through that, we were able to identify that this is maybe it's okay. Maybe we can accept that our narrative is building, and we are in the process of building what our assets are going to be that will eventually define us. And it worked really well because I mentioned during my introduction that we've got one of the biggest real estate development projects happening in the region, and we've got a couple hundred people moving to this region on a daily basis. There's a lot of growth happening, and it's visible at the metaphoric level in terms of identifying what our identity is, and it's also very clear at the physical level, just looking at all of the cranes that are in the sky for us. So I really latched on to the idea that if we want to develop that narrative, maybe our narrative can be we're building our narrative, metaphorically and physically, and that's exciting because I had the urge to figure out, can we construct it and speak it into existence and get there, or do we have to rely on something a little bit more organic? And going that organic route, at least in the short term, has been interesting and fun to be a part of. So whether it's the right answer, I don't know, but it's our answer for now.
Awesome, thank you. How about you, Archna? Similarly, you're new to the area that you're currently living in and working in.
Yeah, I would echo a lot of what Lakshmi was saying about Tampa, the experience of landing and learning and just like listening to the stories that exist in the marketplace. So same thing, when I got to Milwaukee, I was like, all right, so tell me how you guys talk about yourselves and who are you now and who do you want to be in the future? And, there were some interesting conversations because I think people hadn't really thought about it. One of the great features of the business community are the many Fortune 500s. So obvious benefits to having Fortune 500s in your backyard as a tech entrepreneur, as a young tech entrepreneur. But in the business sense, they also cast a very long shadow. So sometimes their stories are the only stories that get told, right? Because there's Fortune 500, NM, Harley Davidson, Kohl's, etc. So their business stories are the ones that get told. And you have the usual assets of Biz Times, Milwaukee Business Journal, etc. And folks cover a wide range of topics, and tech and startups is like this tiny thing in the back of the program. And it's also usually the first one that gets sidelined when things like COVID come up, and then all the focus goes on to COVID. So, and the Bucks had a great season, so a lot of sports stories were happening. So all of that is great to kind of bring attention to Milwaukee as a region, but in terms of talking about the younger companies and the emerging stories, the great diversity of Milwaukee. It is an extremely diverse city, similar to Philadelphia, majority minority city. Those stories weren't getting told, and they still really aren't getting told. So Milwaukee does not do such a great job of talking about all the great things that are going on in Milwaukee outside of the Bucks and outside of the Fortune 500s. So that is a great opportunity, especially in a moment in time such as right now, to kind of reset the narrative a little bit and talk about the ways that not just the younger companies are addressing this current moment in time, but also why Milwaukee and why Milwaukee for many years to come. So I think that I'm hopeful, and the reason why I'm hopeful also is because I noticed, and this is a shout out to Technically, of course, but I didn't realize the impact of storytelling until I came to a marketplace where that wasn't very active. So storytelling from the community up, right? Not just from the advertisement driven type of publications that are out there, but the ones that really look into the story of a founder outside of just like the raise or, getting an exit and all those wonderful things, but really just the journey of the business, the journey of the company, the journey of the founder. Not having a platform like that here, coming from an ecosystem where there was a strong player in that marketplace, to not having it, you notice the difference. And you're like, I see why we need something like that in a community like this.
Technically Milwaukee, coming to you. And
I'm here for a few more months. So.
Yes, and Deon, of course, same question, but with an added from our Q&A chat, somebody asked if Birmingham has a top-notch engineering/business university. So maybe, I'm not sure the answer to that. Maybe that plays into how y'all tell your story.
Yeah, absolutely. No, this has been fascinating listening to everybody share how they're approaching it, how they are framing some of the questions and opportunities. Birmingham is an interesting bag, right? Depending on who you ask and maybe how old they are, they're going to have completely divergent interpretations about what's going on here. In some ways, I make no bones about it, right? Like, one of the worst things about us is the last name. Sometimes people hear Alabama and they're like, oh, nope, I'm good, not coming down there. And politics aside, right? I mean, there's so many great things about this state, but just Birmingham, where my heart is a fascinating place, right? And so what really excites me right now, and just kind of going back to everybody else's response, one of the things that really stood out to me was how people are leaning into authenticity, right? Which is just the best route to go for something like this. And Birmingham, I think our problem was not necessarily that we didn't have stories to tell, we just weren't telling them ourselves. And so, if you let other people kind of shape that narrative, you miss out on that opportunity to really tell it in a way that is appreciative of the past, right? But also casts a forward-looking vision. I think we're really starting to get to that point now. And so much has changed, at least in my understanding of what rises to the top in as it relates to a community's storytelling ability, right? And you know, going back to, I'm thinking about 2010 when Railroad Park opened. If you're not from Birmingham, you probably would not have heard of it, but it has completely transformed a major section of downtown. And that was really the first kind of physical manifestation of a lot of the small efforts that had been going on to revitalize the area. And so from that, billions in dollars of activity have taken place: a new baseball stadium, condos left and right, breweries, you name it, right? And so that's really given us something to latch on to. But it also incorporates the elements of Birmingham Steel history. Like literally you can sit there and train watch because the major train route goes right by the park. And so it just honors the history in a way that I think Birmingham has really started to embrace, right? Like this is who we are, this is our story, and this is how we plan to use it as a platform going forward. And it also has helped inform what we communicate to outsiders, right? So Birmingham's a Venture for America city. And I think it's top 2 or top 3 in terms of graduates who the cohort class, right? But also in terms of the graduates who actually stay put in the city after their 2-year term is over. And one of the things that we've been communicating to them, and somebody had kind of like alluded to this earlier, is that, you know, we're still building our narrative, right? Like, so Birmingham is not in Atlanta, Birmingham's not in Nashville, nor do we want to be. We want to be the best Birmingham that we can. And our reputation is gritty, right? Steel town. It is about being industrious. It's about rolling up your sleeves and getting dirty. And that's who we are. And if you want to be a part of a city that is literally in the middle of changing its entire trajectory, this is the city for you, right? You can't go to an Atlanta and really change the course, right? That ship is sailed in so many respects, whether it's a Charlotte, right? But Birmingham, we're really going through this period of transformation right now where a lot of young leadership and a lot of young talent can come in, make impact, and then immediately see the results of that impact, right? And it kind of helps in our case, not just, you know, like leaning on the companies. So our chamber has engaged an organization called DCI out of New York. And so if you see Birmingham popping up on a lot of the, best city to move to and great city for graduates, I mean, that helps, right? To have people who can amplify that. But it also helps to have like that champion. And I think we've captured lightning in a bottle, right? And I believe that a lot of cities find themselves at those crossroads where just that right moment in time, if you really capture and harness everything that is going on, you can make some powerful change, right? We just set a new mayor probably about late 2017, I want to say. He's 38 years old, Randall Woodfin, dynamic, incredible guy. We had a new superintendent who really infused a lot of energy into our school board. That helped when the partnership with Apple came up. We have a new CEO over at Ed Farm. I mean, it's just so much that is going on. And so it's not just us saying all of these great things. Everybody is going to be a sunshine pumper about their respective cities, right? But when people get down here and they can see it, it just adds a whole nother weight to it. And we've done some pretty cool initiatives. One is Birmingham Bound, where literally we recognize that our recruitment strategy for startups was going to have to be a bit different. We cannot go to Silicon Valley or call these folks up and say, hey, do you mind taking out a week coming to Birmingham and just, you know, let us sell you on the city. But if we were able to connect with the venture capitalists who have ties to Birmingham and who have maybe invested in these companies, they're going to be a lot more receptive to that message than if it comes from me or even the mayor. And so we've been hosting just cohorts. We'll literally bring about 10 to 20 individuals, CIOs, CTOs, CEOs of these startups and say, hey, come to Birmingham. This is what we bring to the table. These are the tax incentives. We'll have the mayor show up. We'll just tell our story. And we've been able to attract, I believe, about 13 companies now from that effort. So we had to get a bit creative. And going to the part B of the question about the business and engineering school. So the short answer to that is yes, right? So we have UAB, which is a major medical hub, and not just that, just a great institution, recently named top university under 50 years. It's relatively new. It was autonomous in 1969. But a county over, you also have the University of Alabama, which has had great programs of their own, especially in law and a lot of other areas. Auburn probably about an hour and a half south, obviously, War Eagle, one of the best engineering programs in the nation. So we do have a lot of talent here. One of our challenges has not necessarily been to kind of tap into that talent, but to retain the individuals that are coming from outside the state and convince them to stay in Birmingham. So we do have a tremendous amount of resources and assets, and not just UAB, Southern Research. Birmingham's really done a great job in kind of seeding some of these tech companies. If you've used Shipt, which is a grocery delivery service, everybody's talking about them now. They were founded and based in Birmingham. Target acquired them. So
yeah.
Say that again.
No, just that's interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah, exactly, right. And so Target acquired them, but kept the headquarters down here. And so again, all of that happened around the same time. We were saying this is a new city, and for that to be the largest exit in Birmingham's or the state's history, $550 million, it just added so much weight to our argument. So that's what we're trying to do, right? Just to kind of wrap it up, take all of these sources, capture lightning in a bottle, and then just get creative with who we broadcast that message to.
Yeah.
Hey, Julie, I wanted to, before you go on to the next question, pull on something that Deon said that I think is relevant to all of the cities on the panel and probably a lot of the folks in the audience. This idea of the smaller, high energy cities being a place for where people in their late 20s, early 30s can have an immediate impact on the civic infrastructure and the startup scene, I think is something that we've glossed over quite a bit. I actually learned this from an author in Tampa Bay, Lakshmi, Peter Kageyama, who talks about how much easier it is to interface with a city like Milwaukee or Pittsburgh or Birmingham. Whereas if you just go to San Francisco or New York, you are one literally in 10 million. And so I think that's an emerging piece of our neighborhood, or our narrative in Pittsburgh of come here and build with us. But I think it's something that really unites a lot of the cultures in our cities right now, and what could define success for us as people start looking for more resilient locations away from the coasts after the current crisis.
We try to tap into that. We try to define it as Tampa Bay is a place where you can build a business, but also build a community. And I experienced that exact sort of that accessibility of a smaller city that just has fewer, less of the hierarchy and more of an openness to just say, hey, if you're willing to do the work and you're passionate about this community, come on in and help us build.
So speaking of building a business, Lakshmi, we are already in a recession. We'll just say that. We have typically seen a decline in entrepreneurship, after the Great Recession specifically, we actually saw a decline in entrepreneurship, although it is often it's sort of touted as being this, the time when like Airbnb started and a bunch of other big startups got their start then, but still rates overall were down. So how bad do you expect, you collectively, how bad do you expect that this economic shock is going to be? Where do you expect that your city is going to be in 6 months from now or a year from now? And specifically for those who are working in entrepreneurship, how do you expect that economic shock will affect entrepreneurship in general in your areas?
I work with entrepreneurs. Embark Collective is a startup of sorts, so I can't help but be more optimistic about the possibility. And I think that there's a whole slew of problems that have emerged because of this crisis, and problems that are worth solving. And that's always been my frustration. If I'm not that interested in working with sort of vanity projects, vanity startups. I like to work with companies that are actually making a meaningful difference in society. And now there's a plethora of problems to be solved in society. And so from my perspective, I'm hoping that this, instead of slowing things down, maybe refines the problem sets that are sort of top of mind and the most urgent to keep our society going. It may be a very Pollyanna view of a terrible time, but you can't work in this business without feeling like, having some sort of optimism around this. So, even just thinking about the companies that we're working with, how they've been able to shift what their technologies are doing to more meaningfully solve the urgent needs of our community, it's been amazing to watch. And then for those that had problems that maybe are just getting put on the back burner because it's just not a priority. It gives those entrepreneurs space to think about, hey, is this going to hibernate until the crisis is over? Or do we really need to rethink the technology's use case? And can there be a more meaningful way to utilize it now?
Yeah, thank you. Archna, you are working on similar issues, I suppose. So would love to hear your perspective there.
Yeah, again, to echo what Lakshmi said, I think in Milwaukee, one of the greatest advantages that I've seen is the sheer size of the city. It is big enough. It's a population of about 600,000, where when you test out some ideas, test out some early stage ventures, you can get feedback really quickly and adjust and pivot as you need to. But it's small enough that you can have a really big impact across the community. And if you can get it to work in Milwaukee, it can scale pretty easily outside of the city, because the city is a city. It's an urban center, and it faces the same issues as many cities across the country, whether that's poverty, public education, healthcare, infrastructure, however you call it, whatever you want to say. And so to the point that Lakshmi made about what this crisis has, or this economic moment in time that we find ourselves in, it's unearthed a lot of fundamental issues, and it's brought to the surface and really prioritized all of our thinking into solving for these issues. Not all of them need tech solutions, but they need energetic, thoughtful, forward-thinking entrepreneurs of all backgrounds and shapes and sizes to address. So one of the things that I'm really excited to see Milwaukee capture and move forward. And of course, like, we were hoping for the DNC and those kinds of things to bring that national spotlight to a lot of these stories. But I'm hoping that the silver lining of this moment that we're in right now is that Milwaukee can activate that progressive history that it has, and it has that DNA in its city and its community and its people, and it has some of those core assets. Like, there is a code for Milwaukee, so there are communities that care about these issues downtown, and so activating all of those people and coming up with these brilliant ideas to solve for problems that are located, in the community right here, but that are located in communities, in cities across the country. So build it here, solve it here, and scale it out of Milwaukee. So I'm hopeful that that is one of the silver linings to come out of the economic place that we're in right now.
Yeah, thank you. And Sean and Deon, no pressure to respond, but if you have anything you'd like to add, throw that in.
One thing that's interesting to me right now in like this downturn versus previous ones is I think our smartest and homegrown innovators have a safe harbor that they didn't have in 2002 and 2008. And that's the big tech companies kind of disaggregating themselves from San Francisco and the East Coast. So when I think about a brilliant person graduating from Carnegie Mellon who maybe a year ago was going to go start her own company, I'm assured a little bit that maybe she's going to go get a job at Duolingo for 2 years, and we're going to keep her in Pittsburgh. And so we're still going to get that brain power and that entrepreneurial juice, but she's going to be okay for a little bit because Duolingo is still hiring really smart people. And that didn't exist for Pittsburgh, at least. And I think a lot of our cities, the last couple rounds of this, where, the only place to get a job was New York, or the only place to get a job was in San Francisco, or you had to go, flip burgers or do whatever to really bootstrap your idea. So I'm interested to see how that prominence of tech hiring around the country, going back to the rise of the rest narrative, changes the economic recovery and juices entrepreneurship in a shorter amount of time.
Yeah, I'm just going to say thanks for offering that up, Sean, because I have a little bit more optimism now. So, I've been trying to find an analog for what we're experiencing right now. And all that I've been able to uncover is just that we're going to be in for a rough ride. And I don't think that's anything to shy away from, but I do think that there are some elements at play now that were not available to us, if you will, in past recessions and crises. So thanks for offering that up. And I honestly, this is way outside of my ability to divine, but hopefully we'll start to see a shift now where, and this is just my belief I'm offering up, but the people who are closest to the problem are also closest to the solution. And so I would like to see not just the federal government, because quite honestly, I think a lot of cities are on our own when it comes to solving for some of these challenges, right? But just as an ecosystem, if we can recognize just the assets and the tremendous talent that is located right here in our own backyard, and then start thinking like, how do we cultivate that locally? What does that look like? And one of our charges at TechBirmingham, of course, is to bring in outside tech talent, outside companies, but we also have to recognize that that's a Band-Aid, right? That's a short-term play. We should be creating ecosystems and communities where kids are tripping over resources, and not just in coding, right? That's usually how we kind of frame it, but just in creativity as well, because there are going to be a lot of skills required to operate in this new reality that coding might not solve for. It's going to be about collaboration. It's going to be about leadership skills. So much is going to be at play here. And so hopefully, just the same way it's highlighted the fact that, well, you know what, internet access is probably a right at this point. We need to make sure folks have that. We'll start talking about entrepreneurial skills and resources and other elements that communities and kids need to really start developing in STEM related and creative related disciplines. So, but again, thank you for giving me a bit of optimism going into the weekend.
Better than Auburn's chances this fall.
I know, right? Suddenly disconnected. Crying in the corner.
I don't know what that means, but I don't know what to say about that football reference, but thank you for saying it.
That is something that we offer up that is unique to the South. Listen, you can be at a funeral. It is appropriate to talk about college football.
Man, good to know. So we are coming up on time in a couple minutes. But we're getting some great audience questions, but I did want to hit one more from me. And everyone feel free to keep this one short, maybe tweet length perhaps. What is some advice that you would give to entrepreneurs, economic development folks, policymakers who want to tell their city story right now? So maybe something quick that you could share that you've learned while marketing your own city. What's some advice that you would give to others?
I would say set your own narrative, building off of what a lot of folks have said, and be confident in what the new narrative that you are promoting is.
That is very tweetable. Thank you.
Along those lines, I'd try to find the overlap between what is authentic to you and what is differentiated for you.
Oh, that's great.
Awesome.
Find ways to capture lightning in a bottle. I think every city will go through that point where the stars just seem to align. And to the degree that you can just harness all of that, bring it together, use collaboration, and tell that story, the better.
I really don't have much to add. Those were great tweets. I would say all those same things, and then I would tell the story, do it. And it doesn't happen enough in a lot of emerging tech hubs, even established tech hubs. So tell the story. Do that all the time.
Awesome. And you were also succinct that we do have a couple minutes still, so I will ask another question. This is a question that was asked from an audience member. It's directed at Sean, but I think that probably others will have a response. What are some community solutions from Pittsburgh that you can share learnings about during this time? And also what kinds of organizations help you to amplify your impact, such as the Forbes Fund, for example?
So let me go backwards on that. Pittsburgh's been working on an economic transformation for 25 to 30 years. And our foundations and civic infrastructure has been investing in advanced healthcare, advanced life sciences, robotics, and advanced manufacturing for that whole time. And so unlike a Boulder or some of these cities that saw a dot-com boom and then a dot-com bust cycle, we've been building at the grassroots level using nonprofit organizational infrastructure to kind of get Pittsburgh to a critical mass. And so we have like national leaders in the nonprofit accelerator sector. Folks like Alpha Lab and Alpha Lab Gear were, really early in this movement that were supported by our universities and our foundations. And so as we came in as kind of an additive piece, our charge was very explicitly not to replicate any of the work that's already happening, because we don't have enough resources to duplicate what Alpha Lab is doing or what our Tech Council is doing or our life science accelerators are doing. And so we're very passionate about this kind of being a convener and centralizing responses, especially now in an economic crisis, and making sure that all of those disparate elements are working together to drive Pittsburgh towards our goal of being a global innovation hub. And that, I think, is really the community message is, we have set a community-wide goal to capture that lightning in a bottle, to Deon's point. And it's not any one person. It's not any single Fortune 500. It's not any single university. It's all of us working together towards a joint purpose. And that really defines Pittsburgh, I think, since 1979, is us kind of figuring out how we get back to being a global leader and everyone really driving towards that together.
What happened in 1979?
See, this is part of the narrative setting. We're trying really hard, all of our economic development organizations, not to talk so much about the past because we are traumatized by it. So our mayor says very succinctly, in 1979, the Pirates won the World Series, the Steelers won the Super Bowl, and the steel industry collapsed like within the span of a year. And so, there are Pittsburghers in Tampa in particular. There are a lot of Pittsburghers in Birmingham, and they're there because there was no economic opportunity for an entire generation of people. And so those of us that are in Pittsburgh now are really focused on defining what Pittsburgh of the future looks like, and no longer being defined by the folks that lived through that calamity and kind of set the foundation for us to get here.
Got it. Thank you for clarifying.
Thank you, Julie. I was like, what the hell happened in that year? It's an awesome hook, right? If you got to tell the story.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you, Sean. Anybody else want to chime in on community solutions that you're seeing, learnings from this time, other organizations that are amplifying the work that y'all are doing? We can get like maybe one or two more responses with the time that we have left.
I think just to reinforce your point around collaboration, I've only lived in larger markets before coming down to Tampa. And so the willingness to collaborate was a little bit startling for me. I'm much more used to ego and silos, and our kingdom is better than your kingdom. And so the willingness to see our collective objectives and seeing the overlap in those collective objectives has been really amazing for the Tampa Bay market, and the willingness to come together. We just had a partner call this week we have about 40 or so local partners that we share opportunities with. They share opportunities with us. We just try to find where there's moments for collaboration and not to duplicate the work, because there's a ton of work. So why make it harder? And so being able to just check in and say, what are you guys doing to support your community, your specific stakeholders during COVID? Is there something that we can grab from that? Is there something we can offer from that? That type of conversation I hadn't seen in larger markets. So just another benefit for, the nimbleness and the realization that resources are scarce. So we have to work together in these smaller markets.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lakshmi, for that answer. To everyone, I think I need to cut us off because we're at about time, but this was very illuminating for me. I think we all learned a lot about each other's cities, so I'm excited to hopefully keep the conversation going in different ways, perhaps by expansions of technically to to Milwaukee first, absolutely first. Birmingham next, Tampa next, yeah. But yeah, thank you all so much for joining and sharing perspectives on telling your innovation story. We're going to be hearing Yeah, thank you. We're going to be hearing from Chris Wink, our CEO, to wrap up the day.
Wow.
Oh,
Wow, I
There he
believe I'm
is.
here. Hey, before we lose our crew, it's been a long, day. Thank you for this session. I think we have just a couple final slides that we're going to send us off with, and then with our dear friend Karen Copeland at Create Exchange, we have a partnered keynote with Arlen Hamilton, who will unfortunately has a different Zoom login for a whole bunch of different logistical notes. But to close us out, thank you for the whole Technically team. For those of you who were with us for the whole day, wow, we've been at this since 8:30, so thank you for that. Reminder that this Introduced Virtual was our first. In September, we will have the 10th annual Philly Tech Week presented by Comcast, September 21st and 25th. Friday, September 25th, we will have our annual Introduced conference. Hit that next slide, Katrina, as we fly through these here. The endless plug, you came to this event for free because we're feeling it out. We are a community journalism organization. We like telling companies stories. We like underwriting stories that are not otherwise told. We also have the Technically Journalism Fund, which helps us produce independent journalism in a half dozen markets. There's a pay what you can level for those of you who are interested at Technically Journalism-Fund. Next slide, Katrina. Just noting in the fall, we do have some partners who are already signed on before we postpone this thing. So thank you to you friends for supporting us, and we'll see you in the fall. Next up, Katrina. I think we just want to close out. Yeah, we're going to do an entire summer of virtual events. This is the kicking off a series. So you'll see a lot more if you do sign up for our Philly Tech Week newsletter. There at the bottom at bit.ly link, bit.ly/PTW20news. You'll see lots of updates of virtual events. And yeah, there will be recaps. All of these sessions will be recorded. They will run on Technically, and you can head over to the keynote also. But this has been a really great day. I think we just say thank you now is our final slide, if I remember correctly. Yes, thank you. You'll get a survey. I'm going to drop it in the comments. Fill it out. 600 of you came through throughout today. We're going to send it to everyone. Please come out and tell us what we can do better about the virtual events of the future. And thank you to this panel as well.
thank you.
Bye, everybody. See ya.